Harry Houdini was practically a born performer. As early as 9 years old, he was participating in the local circus. In a time where the Western world was looking to live life beyond their work, Houdini was ready to provide entertainment, starting out with measly card tricks before perfecting his escape acts. He was a busy man, from touring across whole continents to starring in movies to taking down psychics and spiritualists. He always boasted an attitude that the show must go on. Even after being dealt the blow that would end his life, Houdini would perform 3 more shows, solidifying him as one of the best performers of all time. This is the story of Harry Houdini, and this is Learn Something New. Eric Weiss was born on March 24, 1874 in Budapest, Hungary, though he wouldn't stay there long, as when he was just 4 years old, his parents brought all 7 of their children to Appleton, Wisconsin, the town Weiss would later claim he was born in. Although he would begin performing as early as age 9 at his neighborhood circus in a trapeze act, he would soon find himself moving again. He would work many jobs from a young age, but one of the most applicable to his future career was a locksmith apprenticeship he took on at the age of 11, learning the ins and outs of the lock's internal mechanisms. When he was 13 years old, Weiss and his father went ahead of the family to New York City, living frugally and taking on whatever work they could get to arrange a stable living situation for when the rest of the family joined them. When he wasn't selling newspapers or shining shoes, Eric developed a love for sports, especially swimming, boxing, and running. It was also around this point that he began looking into the craft of stage magic, reading library books about magicians and contortionists. Not long after, he and his friend began to dabble in magic performances themselves, starting an act called the Brothers Houdini. The name Houdini stemmed from a famous French magician of the time named Jean-Eugène Robert Houdin. The magician had written a book titled The Memoirs of Robert Houdin, ambassador, author, and conjurer, written by himself. Eric greatly admired Houdin's work, and at the time, there was a common practice of adding an I to the end of a name you adopt to show respect for a mentor, giving him the name Houdini. While he was at it, he changed his first name from Eric to Harry, a more Americanized version of his nickname Harry. And at just 18 years old, they took their act on the road, performing card tricks and some other basic tricks as they familiarized themselves with their craft. It was during this time that he would meet another performer named Wilhelmina Beatrice Rayner, whom he called Bess. Harry would waste no time courting, marrying, and then making Bess his assistant in his performances, leading to the brothers Houdini to become the Houdinis. Life on the road in the late 1800s was extremely taxing, however, and when he was just 25 years old, Houdini found himself quickly becoming burnt out on the work, and began to contemplate the idea of leaving magic behind. When, in 1896, the regular circus shows closed down for the season, Houdini began to struggle for work, and that's when he came across a man who went by the name Dr. Hill, who ran Dr. Hill's California Concert Company, which traveled around the country performing a medicine show that touted his tonic that could cure just about anything, extremely reminiscent of other snake oil salesmen of the time. I'll link the video I did on snake oil salesmen at the end of this video. In need of money, Houdini accepted Dr. Hill's job offer to join the medicine show. His escape acts didn't resonate as well with Dr. Hill's intended audience, however, and after just a few shows, Dr. Hill asked if Houdini could instead play the role of a spiritual medium. Houdini was well aware of many of the tricks fake psychics and clairvoyants of the time were pulling, and so he agreed, leading seances with Bess acting as the clairvoyant. They were exceptionally convincing and drew in tons of crowds that believed the Houdinis could legitimately contact the dead. However, Houdini knew that he was lying to the throng of people, many of which had experienced devastating losses from close friends and family members. And the guilt eventually led the Houdinis to part ways with Dr. Hill. Instead of performing on the road, Houdini began to contemplate making the move into teaching, sending a catalog out for Harry Houdini's School of Magic, while he was back in New York visiting his family. But he was convinced to get back out onto the road, not giving up quite yet. And it was a great thing he did, because just a few months later, in the spring of 1899, Houdini caught his big break. After performing at a beer garden in St. Paul, Minnesota, Houdini was approached by Martin Beck, a wealthy theater proprietor who was enthralled with the handcuff escape act. The next day, he brought Houdini a pair of his own handcuffs, and once again, Houdini was able to escape them. A few days later, after Beck had moved on from the city, he sent a telegram to Houdini from Chicago, which read, "You can open Omaha March 26th, $60. We'll see act probably make you proposition for all next season." Houdini would later say of the telegram, "This wire changed my whole life's journey." By the end of the year, the Houdinis were playing in Beck's venues all across the Midwest and as far west as California, but by early 1900s, they had already expanded into a circuit on the East Coast as well. Houdini would do high-profile public stunts to drum up publicity and then draw in the crowds to the theater shows. These stunts would give him names like the King of Handcuffs and the celebrated Police Baffler. Houdini wasn't becoming as burnt out from the traveling and the shows anymore because, in addition to making significantly more money, he was performing fewer shows with higher stakes and wealthier audiences. Martin Beck's venues were becoming increasingly exclusive, and Harry Houdini was at the forefront of the talented cast of performers. But despite the transcontinental success, the American audience for Houdini's shows were dwarfed by the European market, who had been indulging in escape acts for the better part of a decade. After a falling out between Houdini and Beck, Harry set up his own European tour, a massive project that would span half a decade. He would travel across the continent, performing in exceptionally popular shows. He continued his practice there of public exhibitions as a marketing tool, one of which was reported on from the London Mirror newspaper, where a special, more secure set of handcuffs were crafted specifically for Houdini, which he was able to free himself from after an hour. After returning to the US in 1905, Houdini had made a name for himself for his escape attempts, and he intended on capitalizing on them, escaping from jail cells in cities all across the country, including the exact cell where Charles Guiteau was kept after he assassinated President James Garfield. From here, Houdini took on larger stunts, upping the ante with each major performance, jumping off of a bridge while handcuffed or sealing himself inside a locked container filled with water. He began innovating and perfecting his escapes. But when the US announced that they were going to be joining World War I, Houdini felt compelled to join the military. They denied him, however, as he was 43 years old by this point. Instead, he spent the closing years of the war doing free performances to keep up the morale of soldiers. After the war ended, he decided to take on a new, increasingly popular medium of entertainment: movies. His first silent film was a hit with audiences, spurring him to create his own movie studio. But after several films lost a lot of money, he made the call to close up shop. He did continue his performances, however, but now with an additional hobby on the side: debunking anyone who claimed to have supernatural abilities. You see, during this point in history, spiritualism was seeing a massive surge in popularity, but Houdini, still believing the practice was taking advantage of those grieving, especially the families of those who passed away during the war, took on psychics, mediums, and mystics, attending seances and mediums, exposing every single one he came across as a fake. Many spiritualists hated him for this, and he began receiving numerous death threats. Their hopes for his demise would ultimately come to fruition on October 22, 1926, when Houdini was preparing for a show in his dressing room. A man asked if Houdini would be able to resist a punch to his torso. Houdini said he could, but before he had the chance to tense his muscles, he was punched 3 times. The man left, and Houdini would go on to perform in the show, as well as do 2 more performances the following day, but would collapse by the end. In the hospital, they had found that his appendix had burst from the punches, and he passed away Halloween Day, 1926. Thank you for watching Learn Something New. If you enjoyed this video, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel. Or if you want, you can check out the channel's Patreon, linked below in the description. A very special thanks to the channel's patrons, but as always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.